Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today in our celebration of Juneteenth. It is our honor and privilege to have two representatives from the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project here to discuss not only the memorial project itself, but the historical events that kind of led to this wonderful, wonderful program that they've put together. Before we jump into the presentation, I just have some housekeeping items to go over first. First and foremost, we will be having a Q&A at the end of the program, but please feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A or the chat features in the Zoom dashboard. There is a survey that will be available at the end of the webinar, so if you have time, I ask you please complete the survey, and we always love hearing your feedback. If you want some more information on the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project, you can visit the web address on the screen there, and I will send that out in the chat so that there's a live link of it for you to look at your leisure. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Zoom dashboard, this is what your dashboard should look like. If you're using a PC or a Mac, if you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all the features will still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you will see your audio settings. This is where you can check if you're connecting using a headset or earbuds to make sure that everything is connected properly. At any point during the presentation, if you run into any issues, there is a raise hand button here in the middle. You can click on that and that'll alert me. I will send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to solve any problems that you are having. And as I mentioned before, if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat buttons, and any questions, we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So that is everything that I have for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Juliet now to do the introductions.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Juliet Concello, and I'm the co-chair, one of the co-chairs of the Thomas Edison State University and New Jersey State Library's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council. We work with a group of highly talented and dedicated colleagues to bring awareness regarding DEI issues to the library and university community. And I'm excited to be here today as we learn more and celebrate Juneteenth. The council was charged by the university president to generate dialogue and engagement regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion across and among the members of Thomas Edison and the New Jersey State Library community. In addition, we develop recommendations to university administration that fosters a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture. We promote educational and professional development programs, and we create assessment tools to evaluate if the work that we are doing and how the work that we are creating is making an impact. Please visit our portal if you have any other questions or would like to learn more. I now have the honor and privilege to introduce today's speakers. Crystal Langford is a lecturer of Black Studies and Psychology at William Patterson University. She is also a doctoral candidate in the Education, Culture, and Society program, Graduate School of Education at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Broadly conceived, her doctoral work and historical inquiry seeks to elucidate how the proliferation of Black bodies in New Jersey's public schools during the Great Migration agitated the hegemony of whiteness in classroom practices, teaching, and training materials. In 2019, she joined the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project as a founding trustee. She is featured on the PBS documentary, The Price of Silence, the forgotten story of New Jersey's enslaved people, and she has co-authored the curriculum for the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project. Welcome, Ms. Langford. In addition, Ms. Toni Hendricks is the president and board of trustees, as the president of the board of trustees for the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project Incorporated. And with that, I welcome you. Thank you for joining us and turn it over. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. And thank you very much for Juliet for having us here this morning. We truly appreciate the opportunity to extend the celebration of 2023 Juneteenth. I can't think of a more appropriate forum in which to do that. As was introduced, I am Tony Hendricks. I am the president of the Board of Trustees, and I'm going to be doing the least amount of talking. I just want to give you just a brief background on who we are, and then I'm going to turn it over to Crystal so that she can get into the meat of the discussion. What you'll be learning about today occurred in 1818 in what is now incorporated East Brunswick, New Jersey. You will learn about a crime that was committed by a sitting Middlesex County judge and assisted by other magistrates, as well as other people of prominence in our state. You will learn of the crime that they committed against our fellow citizens here in the state of New Jersey and the loopholes in the law. But you will also learn a very compelling story about the individuals who were involved. 200 years after that ring was operating, the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project was brought to our attention about this particular history. It was brought to the attention of a prominent citizen in East Brunswick, Mavonia Caldwell, who, along with other individuals in East Brunswick, decided that they wanted to bring back and bring forward this important history that occurred in their backyard. So we are a 501c3 New Jersey-based organization, and we are here not to say that we are the ones who have discovered and own this history. We are the current stewards of this history, and we take our responsibility very, very seriously. And that's why I, as the president of the board, and thank you, and I want to thank you on behalf of our entire board of trustees, that we are so delighted that Crystal is our historian, because she is fiercely protective of the accuracy in the materials that we will be presenting to you and present to others through our website. So it's now my honor to turn it over to Crystal Langford so she can relate this important information. Go ahead, Crystal, do your thing.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Juliet, for the introduction. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for the entire team who has made the Thomas Edison State Library for making this presentation possible. So yes, without further ado, I will be sharing my screen and talking about the slavery that transpired. And as Tony just shared, right, we're definitely going to focus on the citizens of our great state of New Jersey. So without further ado, give me a second as I prepare my screen. All right. So are you able to see my screen, everyone?
Yep, looks good.
It's loading. Awesome. All right. So again, thank you for joining us today as we discuss a facet. Am I delayed? I see it's a little lag. Is it a lag on your end? Just a tad bit?
The video's a little delayed, but your audio is coming through fine.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to again thank you for joining us today as we discuss a facet of our history that is often neglected and ignored, right? So we're talking about Black history, Black people, our resilience, as well as slavery, right? So we talk about slavery in terms of like the transatlantic slave trade, but we don't really talk about slavery, and particularly in New Jersey, about the interstate trade, slave trade. So, and we also do not talk about the ways in which we participated as a state. However, we're not the only ones, right? So I wanted to share this a little bit of like my experience. Every single time I have an opportunity to go down to the National Museum of African American History and Culture down in DC, one of my favorite sections is going down to the domestic slave trade. Obviously, there's some bias there because it's pertaining to my research. However, what I have noticed is that when you look at the map that's on the wall in that center, you notice that you see, as we see with this map in front of us, you notice all of the arrows, right, going down from the upper south into Galveston, into New Orleans, into Alabama. However, what you don't notice, I don't know if you'll be able to see this on my screen, is that there are no arrows actually coming from New Jersey, right? So we start with New York, and then it goes into Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and then it goes down to the southern states, right? So again, we're not the only ones that have gotten this wrong, right? The history in general has kind of like omitted us, right? Removed us from the narrative as being participants in the slavery or in the domestic slave trade. Whoops, there we go. So our organization's mission is one, tell the story of the slavery, right? We're providing, what I'm going to be doing today actually is providing a micro history of a macro history, right? Highlighting this particular story, the Van Wickle slave ring, in the context of the domestic slave trade. However, our organization's mission really is to center the voices and the experiences of the lost souls. But we wouldn't have lost souls if we don't have a slave ring, right? So again, I'll be kind of going deeper into detail of this act that took place in 1818. And it would be remiss of me if I didn't acknowledge other historians who have brought this story forward, right? So obviously their focus is different, right? So we have Frances Pigeon, late Frances Pigeon, who was a historian who kind of talked about the Van Wickle slave ring. She also pointed out the resistance, but that wasn't her focus. All right, her focus was just to bring light on this slave trade that was taking place here in New Jersey. Same thing with Calvin Schermerhorn, Gigotino, Graham Hodges, who really focused on the economic aspect of slavery, right? When we read history books about slavery, it really focuses on, right, how much money was made and how economic systems grew, right? Different parts of the world, well, different parts of America, how, depending if it's tobacco, depending on whether or not it's cotton, right? How they generated their wealth. So these individuals, again, they're focused more so on the economic sense system, the dollars and cents, as opposed to the humans, right? And then we have Edward Baptiste, who he has a textbook called The Half Has Never Been Told, who actually focuses on the humanity aspects of it, right? And I think because of his work, along with Marissa Fuentes and Taya Miles and Stephanie Camp, because of their work, it kind of helped allowed me to kind of like frame the direction in which we take the lost soul stories in terms of like looking at their humanities, looking at these individuals as humans, as opposed to what they provided for a system that depended upon their labor, right? When we are, again, taking the work from, or taking the language actually from Edwards, right? When we're looking at the domestic slave trade from the north, south, we're talking about 835,000 people at least, right? And of that 835,000, we're talking about, for the lost souls, at least 137 of them were part of what made up this number. Some of them walked, right? Some of the individuals who made up the domestic slave trade, who were victims of this human trafficking scheme, they walked, right? When we're talking about 700 miles, right? We're talking about 1,000,000 steps. From New Jersey to Louisiana, we're talking about at least 1,300 steps. So 1,300 miles. So we're talking about at minimum 2 million steps, right? So just think about it as humans. You're walking 10,000 steps, right? Which is the recommended. Sometimes it's tiring, right? That's 5 miles. But imagine these individuals who wore chains, right, around their neck. They have these braces around their neck, and they're connected to individuals, right? So if one falls, all of them falls. If one seeks to escape, if one seeks to escape, right, they also have to think about the ramifications of what's going to transpire to their family members, right? Or what's going to transpire to the people who are part of that coffle with them, right? So as they're walking or as they're being transported on these vessels, right, from New Jersey to their point of destination, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, right? So they're looking at young children the sad reality is those young children, that's their future. right? So it's like they're thinking about these things, right? So again, we're thinking about the human aspect of enslavement, right? So these individuals are thinking about their future, right? And they're thinking about freedom, hence the reason why they're escaping. So now we get to the lost souls. We get to the 137 who were taken out of New Jersey and also out of New York, right? So they were a conglomerate of freed and enslaved individuals who had established roots here in New Jersey and again in New York. So upon my research, I did find that some came from Newton, they came from Newark. We have many that came from the Middlesex region. We have a couple that came from Bridgewater, Somerset, and Elizabeth, right? And again, as part of our project, we're working to uncover these communities in which which these individuals came from, to provide a more wholesome picture of what life was like for them during that period. So when we're thinking about these humans, right, we're thinking about these individuals who had hopes and dreams, right, of becoming free, right? This is why we're celebrating Juneteenth. It's because this is an acknowledgement of, this freedom, right? But we're talking about 1818 at the time. So we have individuals who are praying and dreaming and hoping to become free. And then boom, we have this gradual emancipation act that was passed in 1804 that actually promised freedom. It actually promised freedom to children born on or after July 4th, 1804, right? So this gradual, how this act would take place, how their freedoms would be secured is that when the child, if she's a female child, when she turned 21 years old, then she would secure her freedom, right? She would be granted by New Jersey law her freedom. And if the child was a male child, was born a male child, when he turns 25, he would be granted his freedom as well, based upon New Jersey law. Right. So individuals like Kate, well, both Kates here, and I have their birth records. Individuals like these two Kates, they would be free based upon this law. However, we have two individuals who had different visions, right? They had a different idea of what this could mean for themselves, one, and for the lives of these individuals. However, when we look at the history, right, we kind of center Van Wickle as the mastermind of this slavery, right? Although he was part of, it really wasn't his idea really to establish. Let me not say it wasn't his idea to establish the slavery. The idea wasn't birthed until Charles Morgan, who is his brother-in-law. Charles Morgan is this individual right here, who was his brother-in-law, who decided to make a detour from Virginia into New Jersey to go visit Charles Morgan, to visit Van Wickle, Judge Jacob Van Wickle. Charles Morgan actually came up to New Jersey with $45,000 in hand. When we look at the equation of that 45,000 back then, we're talking about $1 million, about $1 million in America's money, in today's money, right? So he comes up and he's having a conversation with Van Wickle, right? Van Wickle, being in New Jersey, being not too far from the slave auctions, looking at the newspapers, right? Looking at the prices, seeing what these individuals are going for, he relayed to Charles Morgan, hey, listen, you can actually get them for cheap, right? Because in the South, you're probably looking at paying $800 for a soul. I saw an article yesterday where one soul, a fine man, right? A fine young man, he was going for $1,200, but they were talking about how much money that he could reap for his plantation owner, over the span of a year, right? So we're looking at anywhere between $600 to $1,800 a year. So pretty much these individuals would be profitable in terms of they would yield them a lot of money. So Van Wickle and Charles Morgan conspired, right? So this is the birth of idea. The idea is taking place as a result of this conversation. So back here on the screen, you see his plantation. Matter of fact, when we look at the maps for Charles Morgan, whose plantation is actually in Point Coupe, he actually owns a lot of land, right? So in this one in particular, it's over 2,000 acres, right? But if you look at the map, you know, looking back, you'll see that he owns plenty of properties to have these individuals till his land. So what Van Wickle did was he tapped into his political networks. Not only did he tap into his political networks, he tapped into his familial networks. Remember, I said Van Wickle and Charles Morgan, they're brother-in-laws, right? So when we look at the scheme, right? So then this network, a lot of them are related. A lot of them are, and they're keeping the scheme within the family. Upon the research, and comes out of Morgan's mouth himself as he's defending himself from being called a kidnapper, we find that Isaac H. Williamson, who is the 8th governor of New Jersey, being a part of the slavery. Isaac H. Williamson, according to according to Charles Morgan, was a respectable person, right? And that he would not, Charles Morgan that is, he would not have secured individuals, enslaved people, if they didn't come from respectable homes. So Isaac Williamson, Governor Williamson, actually sold Charles Morgan to enslaved persons. We also see that Van Wickle, he conspired with other judges, outcalled in particular, to sign their certificates of removal, right? And so the certificates of removal pretty much are documents that says that these individuals, these enslaved persons, gave permission to go south, right? So everyone, according to New Jersey state law, everyone needed to be examined by 2 judges, Van Wickle, of course, being one of them, from the courts of common pleas. So 2 judges would sign the certificate and the individual would be sent south. So we also have, oops, this is an error. William P. Deere, he actually wasn't a judge. He actually was a counsel for Van Wickle, as well as Morgan, and as well as Richard Stockton. Both, matter of fact, Richard Stockton was a congressman. William P. Deere was the trustee for Rutgers, and he also was the county clerk for Middlesex County, right? So again, Morgan implicates them and say, hey, listen, I got advice from these 2 individuals about how to take these individuals out of the state. I just wanted to make sure everything was legal. But in reality, nothing of what he did was legal. Everything that Charles Morgan did was illegal because the law says that a non-resident cannot remove an enslaved person out of the state of New Jersey. So what does Jacob Van Wickle does? He actually uses his son, Nicholas Van Wickle, as the middleman. John Craig Marsh also served as a middleman, and William Stone also served as middlemen for the slavery. So when we look at the records, Jacob Van Wickle never actually handed cash over to an enslaver, to secure slaves. What he did was he gave this money to Nicholas Van Wickle, John Marsh, and then they would be the ones who handed the cash over. And Van Wickle also used like people who didn't have, prominence as well, right? So we look at this individual by the name of, where is he? Ricketts, James Ricketts. James Ricketts actually, Jacob Van Wickle actually oversaw a court case for him in 1807, right? So obviously Judge Jacob Van Wickle kept in contact with this individual who would eventually become a part of the slave ring, right? So James Ricketts was actually one of the transporters to transport the at least 137 souls. So again, and this list that I have is just a snapshot of some of the participants who were part of the slave ring. We have over 50 actors who we are currently investigating to be able to really, shed light on how intricate the slave ring was. And Van Wickle and Charles Morgan, they were indiscriminate in terms of who they selected to go south, right? So they selected slaves for life, right? So those are individuals who are born before 1804, who the law did not promise freedom to. We have again individuals who were freed, who were either born free or who were made free based upon manumissions or things of that nature, or who actually left right, other states and sought refuge here in New Jersey, as in the case of Eliza Thompson, who I'll be talking about towards the end. Eliza Thompson was a Virginia native who Virginia, once you received your freedom, you had to leave the state. You cannot, or they will re-enslave you. So she came to New Jersey in search of employment. In addition to that, that's another way that he would secure his slaves, those freed individuals who were looking for employment. However, when he reached out to the individuals in particular who were looking for employment, he kind of like promised them freedom in a sense. He was like, hey, listen, what you're going through here in the state of New Jersey, right, in terms of like, you can't live comfortably, you can't enjoy the luxuries of life, right? So if you go south, you'll be able to enjoy the luxuries of life. You'll be able to have this freedom that you're seeking. In addition, we will pay you, right? But the reality is none of that was true. He didn't have any plans on paying these individuals. Obviously, they were not going to have any luxurious life going down there because they were going to be tilling the land, moving from one climate to a different climate, right? So he did that. A lot of souls actually, and Jacob Van Wickle actually admits to this. He actually kidnapped, right? He actually kidnapped, and they were resisting him. Morgan, once he kidnapped them, and Morgan actually placed them on the vessel, Morgan actually says, hey, listen, yes, they were actually pushing back against us. And Van Wickle actually acknowledges this. Van Wickle and Morgan also exploited the bonds between mother and children. They knew mothers, that's a difficult decision to make, to allow, your child to leave you. So Morgan, again, and Jacob Van Wickle exploited this. So what he did was he spoke to some, according to the records, he approached some slave owners and spoke to the mothers and say, hey, listen, your child will be free. So do you want to go with them? And sure enough, sent them south. And it wasn't a guarantee that these individuals would be staying the families would be remaining intact. The youngest that we do have on record is Joseph. Baby Joseph was actually 2 days old when he was born in Morgan's care, right? He was technically still in New Jersey along with his mother, Nancy. However, we have on record that 2 days old is, that he's our youngest child. And then we have the bliss, right, where we have 9 actually in total. We have total 39 people on the bliss, but we have, when we're looking at children and mothers, we have 2 women and 7 children combined on this vessel. So they were, when we're looking at in terms of how many or the type of people that they were looking to send south, they were really focused on young children and young mothers who would be able to continue to be impregnated to fuel the Southern economy. Again, so we have individuals who were kidnapped, right? So we have these individuals who are looking for employment, who were exploited, and we have individuals who, again, according to the records, consented to go, right? Because they didn't want to be separated from their families, right? And we look at this, we look at them, these mothers who not wanting to be separated as a form of resistance, right? Because they understand the implication, not necessarily the implications. They understand how much money that child would be able to reap for their families, the enslaver families in New Jersey. However, they didn't care. They really didn't care. And I was like, well, it's going to impact the dynamics of your family, financial dynamics of the family, but I choose to remain with my child, right? Showing an act of love, right, which these mothers did, was a form of resistance. Crying was a form of resistance because remember, enslaved people were not allowed to show emotions. So, but these women who chose to remain with their children, again, are resisting this system. And I mentioned this earlier in terms of Morgan actually pushing these individuals in the belly of the vessel, and they're pushing back. We also have individuals who tried to escape, right? Many attempted to seek their freedom by eloping, right? So we have an individual by Ann Moore, by the name of Ann Moore, and Betsy carpenter who, although prior to being placed on the vessel, right, being prior to being placed on one of the five vessels, and they escaped, but they were recaptured and placed back on these ships, right? So what you have in front of you is actually a contract for an individual by the name of Eliza Thompson, right? So Eliza Thompson reportedly also attempted to run away, but the contract says if she runs away, then she forfeits, right? So they can extend her time in enslavement, but she forfeits how much, the money that she would be getting to work for them. Again, I do not believe that they paid her. In addition, again, they're extending her contract. So Eliza, along with Betsy, along with Anne Moore, again, they're like escaping, right? Seeking freedom. And these are elements of humanity. No one wants to be held under the yoke of bondage. In addition, we also have individuals, once they arrived to New Orleans, they declared to Beverly Chu, who was the port collector, that they were brought against their will, right? So not only that, we also have individuals who, like Anne, who first, she asserts her humanity by saying, hey, listen, my name is actually not Hannah, it's actually Anne, right? She's saying this, right? She's saying this to a representative of the court, right? As they're debating, the status of, the property. Does she belong to the state of Louisiana, or does she belong to Charles Morgan? But she takes this opportunity again to say, hey, listen, I'm human. My name is Anne. In addition to that, I'm a freed woman, right? So looking at the documents that they presented on these manifests is actually inaccurate. And this is what she's telling the court. Like, this is inaccurate. This is not who I am. So again, we see like these different elements of them fighting for their freedom, whichever way, shape, or form. We also have individuals who they're suing for their freedom. For example, we have Jane Wilson, who sued Raybor, right? So her kidnapper, her enslaver, who attempted to take her out of New Jersey, actually brought her to New York and wanted to take her to Alabama. So what ended up happening with that, New York actually had a law saying that pretty much you cannot, first of all, these people were freed at this point in time, but you cannot take them out of the state if they are, you cannot take them out of, pretty much you can't take enslaved person out of the state. And so again, Jane is like, oh, no, pretty much I'm free. And Jane sues Raybor. However, she loses the case. But the New York Manumission Society actually picks up, they learn of the case and they pick up the case. And they actually defended her in court, and she was able to secure her freedom. Another form of resistance that we don't talk about much often is survival, right? So as I said, I was going to bring up Eliza Thompson again. Eliza Thompson, despite trying to run away and being recaptured and having to pay the consequences of her attempt to secure freedom, Eliza actually was found in the 1870s US Census, right, as still being alive, right? So she survived whatever, she survived the climate, she survived whatever attempted to pretty much extinguish her. We know the conditions in the South, again, is completely different from the North, right? So we have miasmas, right? So in the marshes, which was plentiful down in the South, again, she survived. And we are currently in contact with a potential descendant of Eliza Thompson, who shared with us that this possibly could be her grandmother. So when we're talking about Juneteenth, right, we're talking about freedom, the law actually would have applied to Eliza Thompson simply because her master, her enslaver, actually escaped with her to Galveston, Texas, which is where her descendants are. They escaped with her to Galveston, Texas, where, according to the June 19th proclamation, 1863, 1865, actually freed her. So Juneteenth, we celebrate Eliza for securing her freedom as a result of, well, we want not only celebrate Eliza for securing her freedom, but being determined to see this, her hopes and her dreams be realized. So while the individuals who held offices of public trust ignore the collective pleas of the lost souls, we acknowledge, right, the citizens of Middlesex County who did not, right? And we also have citizens of Essex County who did not ignore these pleas and the plight of these individuals who were human, right? We recognize their resilience, we recognize their humanity, and we recognize and we acknowledge their existence. So with that being said, thank you.
Ready. Thank you so much, Crystal. If anybody does have any questions, Crystal and Tony are here to answer them. So please feel free to put them in the chat or hit the Q&A button and ask them. In the meantime, Regina Fitzpatrick, our genealogy librarian, has something to share on the topic of this, the Van Winkle slave ring, as it's commonly come to be known. So go ahead, Regina. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Crystal and Tony, I want to thank you both so much for being here with us today. I want to acknowledge before I start talking about this little side project that's meant to complement our presentation today, that Vivian Thiel, who is a big important part of this effort, is on today's webinar. So Ms. Viv, if I say anything wrong, I'm sorry. Please chime in chat and yell at me. So it occurred to me, so for those of you who don't know, before I worked at the state library, I worked over at the state archives, and one of my projects over there was processing Middlesex County Court of Common Pleas documents. And I thought it would be really cool to highlight the fact that the state archives has all of the primary documents resources that are relevant to the Van Wickle slave ring. So as part of that, we have court documents like indictments, we have testimony from people. There are newspaper articles about this, including the half-assed apologies issued by both Charles Morgans and James Van Wickle. And so I approached Vivian earlier this year about if we could just get on a brief little video and kind of tell everybody that these collections are available, that they are accessible to the public, so anyone attending today's webinar can access them. Well, Ms. Viv, and Vivian, by the way, is and has for many years been in charge of all of those courts collections over at the state archives. So she is an expert in these records and these documents. And so I approached her and asked her if we could kind of, present and highlight briefly that these were available and that people could see them and interact with them on their own. So if all of you who have learned something today and want to actually look at the documents, like Crystal was saying, it's heartbreaking. Like a lot of the people who were human trafficked were children, like minor children who should have been subject to the 1804 law. And so Vivian thought this was a great idea. She assembled all of these documents. She is a historian by training, so of course she went deep into many rabbit holes. So she found many other useful things that she wanted people to be aware of and have context for, so that they could learn more about the Van Wickle slave ring and its importance and why there was so much public outcry about it as well. So what Vivian and Kate and Ronnie over at the state archives have done is that they have created a digital collection. I'm not sure when that will be going live on the state archives website. It will be very soon. I think Ms. Viv is trying to kind of order the information in a way that it is digestible for people. We have not yet recorded the video. We are hoping to do so this week. Right now, my task, I get a sneak preview of the documents. We are trying to put together a little visual display so that people who are interested in looking at the digital collection can get a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the documents and items that they will be seeing, but that will be freely available on the State Archives website. And we'll just be having, Vivian and I will be having a brief discussion about, you know, her research, what she's found, providing some context and providing some research suggestions so that people are not overwhelmed when they go to look at these documents, because they're, I cannot remember off the top of my head how many documents there are, but there are many, probably hundreds, possibly thousands of documents. So it's a big collection, and we are just absolutely thrilled to be able to provide some additional context and to highlight the fact that, you know, if anybody here would like to dive more into history, you are able to, and that the State Archives does offer these programs, and that they are for everybody. Every New Jersey citizen, every member of the public who is interested can access these. So thank you so much. And I'm really excited to discuss all this with Ms. Viv and put something out there to provide a little bit of research guidance as they're looking at this collection. So Andrew, as we have questions, I will turn it back over to you, Tony and Crystal.
Thank you so much, Regina. All right, let's jump into the first question. Was the group ever disbanded, or they just fall out of existence in talking about the slavery?
No, they didn't fall out. Well, let me not say they didn't fall out of existence. They tried. Once the public took notice of what was transpiring, they kind of, went about it a different way. All right. So I wouldn't say that they disbanded, because we do have evidence that George Steer, like the following year, he went back to Van Wickle to see if he can sign some certificates of removal. And Van Wickle was like, no. And we also have evidence that Charles Morgan returned back to secure some more slaves, enslaved persons. My apologies, enslaved persons, even 18, maybe like 2 years afterwards. So the slavery continued. Whether or not Van Wickle was signing those certificates, I have no clue.
What was the most inspirational story that you found while researching this?
All of the stories of resistance are my favorite. I think the one that stood out the most to me was the story of Anne. So they have her listed as Anne or Hannah, only because the state of Louisiana, well, let me not say the state, right? So you had Charles Morgan and Beverly Chu. Beverly Chu is a port collector, right? They're trying to figure out whether or not this woman is freed or enslaved. And she took the opportunity, again, I'm pretty sure that, it could have been costly for her. She took the opportunity again to assert her humanity, assert her personhood. And she was like, no, first of all, that's not my name. Second of all, like, again, the information that's written on the manifest in terms of like my height, even my skin color, that's not me. She tells them, she's like, I was born a freed woman, and I was brought here against my will. So again, her having the tenacity and, that bravery was really inspiring.
Are you able to tell how many of the captured individuals were able to eventually secure their freedom, or did they all kind of fall?
So far, we've so Walter Wilson, which is Jane Wilson's husband, he escaped, and he was successful in that. We have Jane Wilson, who as I said in the presentation, she secured her freedom based upon the governor of not the governor, the New York Manumission Society, who actually stepped in. I believe it was Governor Livingston who actually was able to secured her freedom. Let me see. So we have Jean, we have Eliza Thompson she was able to secure her freedom by the Juneteenth legislation. So, and we're still looking for some more. So at this moment, between like 3 to 5, I can't think of the other 2 off the top of my head, but yes.
You know, Crystal, if I could step in for a moment, I want to emphasize that the research project for the lost souls is very much ongoing. And that Crystal is just, she's working. Crystal, you're working with Louisiana State University, correct?
Yes, I am.
And
yes.
you're engaging individuals. Would you talk for a moment about how you're going to extend the research?
Yes. So we are currently partnered with with a professor at Louisiana State University, and we do have researchers on ground, going through the archives and submitting us these documents so that we can analyze and kind of like expand the story. So we're doing 2 things. We're looking backwards and we're looking forwards, right? So the team in Louisiana, we're looking at what happened to these individuals. We do know a lot of them, again, try to run away, for example, or we call them freedom seekers. They tried to seek their freedom, particularly the ones who had indentured servant contracts, which we found interesting. So I'm like, okay, well, if they agreed to go, then why are they running away? And they're running away even before they're placed on these vessels. So that's how we know something was kind of fishy about this particular the slave trade. And then we're looking backwards for the souls here in New Jersey, and we're looking at where they came from, right? We're looking at what was the environment like for them, so that we're able to again humanize them, who they were related to, if we could find that information as well.
Was anyone ever rescued, or was public outcry limited to stopping the ring and court orders?
No one, with the exception of Jane, no one was ever rescued, again, with the exception of Jane. However, the outcry actually led to an act in November 7th, right? It says, hey, listen, anyone who was found participating, the act is November 7th, 1818. Anyone who's found participating in the slave ring actually would be held accountable. They would be, brought to justice. And again, that law didn't stop the slave ring. As I said, Charles Morgan continued to try to secure, and he was successful to try to secure enslaved people from the north to the south. It just brought it to like a grinding halt, right? So it didn't stop it immediately. So again, people probably got sneaky with the ways in which he secured enslaved people.
Were the mothers always allowed to accompany the children?
According to Van Wickle, yes. According to Van Wickle, he asked these mothers for their permission to go south with their children. So we have a witness actually by the name of Isaac Holmes, who actually said the permission wasn't actually secured. So we don't know whether or not Van Wickle really secured permission from these parents to go south with their children.
I saw some female sounding names in the list of the enslaved trade gang members. Who were these women? What were their roles?
That's good. That's a good one. So Madam Porter, actually, and we're still investigating that. Oh, good eye. So we had 2, right? So we had Elsie Morgan. Elsie Morgan, according to some documents, she was the daughter of Charles Morgan. However, we are in contact or in communication with a descendant of Charles Morgan, who said that actually wasn't the case. So we're still researching to see who Elsie Morgan was, but she is definitely a relative of Charles Morgan, perhaps a niece. And her father may be Simon Morgan, which again, I'm still kind of like investigating. And then we have Madam Porter. She's from Louisiana. I haven't, found her name yet, her first name. However, she actually was on the vessel, on the Marianne, And she told Jeremiah Plummer. Jeremiah Plummer actually owns the Mary. He was part owner of the vessel Mary Ann. And Jeremiah Plummer was actually, he was afraid, right? He was like, hey, listen, I'm afraid that they're going to seize my vessel, rightfully so, because he knew what they were doing was illegal. So this woman actually, she assured him that nothing was going to happen. She was like, hey, listen, I'll pay you if they seize your vessel, but we don't know what happened after that. But she pretty much was telling him, rest assured, nothing's going to happen. What her role was in terms of like the slave ring, we don't know yet, but I don't know if she was a passenger, but for her to actually tell Jeremiah that he should be okay, I think she played a pretty significant role, but we're still looking into her life as well.
All right. Can you talk about the education curriculum that you've been developing? Has it been implemented yet, and maybe some of the other goals related to that?
Yes, so it hasn't been implemented yet. It actually hasn't even been released yet, because as we were, the first iteration of the curriculum actually was focused on the lost souls. And as we began digging deeper into the story, again, we noticed that, hey, listen, these individuals were making their presence known. So we kind of shifted the direction of the curriculum to really focus on the lives of the enslaved and the role that they played in terms of like community members, right? The role they played as mothers, the role they played as fathers, the role is, the things that you and I celebrate, right? Birthdays and deaths and weddings and things of that, not weddings, but unions and things of that nature. So we really wanted to focus on them as human beings. So we kind of like shifted the curriculum, and we're currently in the process of finalizing that.
All right, I don't see any more questions. So, Jen, if you would like to take us out, that would be great.
Thank you. This was so interesting and so fascinating to hear about. So thank you both, Tony and Crystal, for the great presentation. I know as a native New Jerseyan, it's always astounding to me to learn of this history that I'm just unaware of. So thank you both for being the stewards that you are and sharing your breadth of knowledge with us and all of this information. This was such a great presentation. And thank you to Regina and Vivian too for the work that you're doing. That was really interesting to hear what you both are working on as well. I also want to thank the NJSL Presents for including the DEIC as a co-sponsor for this wonderful event. For anyone interested in learning more about the DEIC, you can check out our newsletter and also the future events through Capitol Campus. And if you're interested in joining the DEIC, there will be a call for new council members as well going out over the next several weeks. We'd love to have you join us. Thank you all for attending, and have a great rest of your afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.